The jetway walk ended, and nearby delegates glanced at each other. Their eyes flickered with curiosity, a thin thread of wariness, and, for some, barely concealed envy. Even in a brief, polite exchange, the two men carried something far beyond ordinary diplomatic rank. What if a single look could shift the balance of power? Lavrov's shadow stretched back to the vanished empire once called the Soviet Union, echoing decades when the world split into two camps and Moscow's voice thundered as loudly as Washington's. Despite the constant jet lag, he moved with steady confidence. His dense wool coat sat perfectly, its fabric catching the wind that lifted its hem like a general's banner from a bygone parade. Silver-streaked hair framed a stern visage, each line telling a story of hardened resolve. Beside him, Benia appeared calm, almost cold, yet his composure radiated a solid support. Observers sensed the contrast immediately. When European envoys arrived, they were met with smiles, nods, a familiar friendly drawl. The moment Lavrov stepped onto the ramp, smiles vanished, the air thickened, and an unspoken line formed between courteous politeness and overt admiration. Soon a convoy of cars left the airport, merging into Manhattan's relentless traffic. The sky darkened as clouds gathered, slicing the sun's rays into jagged patches that fell upon the skyscrapers. A feeling of anticipation lingered, promising more than routine protocol. Here, on the eve of the General Assembly, a story began that might reshape the perception of two worlds. Who will finally break the silence behind the locked door? Black vehicles slipped from the airport perimeter, disappearing into an endless highway stream. New York greeted them with a chaotic symphony, horns blaring, ambulance sirens wailing, an old bus's mournful horn echoing through the streets. The din formed its own strange harmony, as if the city itself breathed in rhythm with the arriving guests. Through slightly tinted windows, Lavrov watched gray Queens neighborhoods flash by, industrial zones, gas stations, neon signs buzzing in the dusk. He stayed silent, his focus razor-sharp. The convoy slowed before a modest building on the East River, far from the grand UN hall where he would speak tomorrow. Instead, it led to an unassuming, windowless room, rented for discreet talks. Guards in crisp suits lined the entrance, tension palpable, words poised to burst forth. Inside, a low ceiling of dark-stained wood enclosed a few soft lamps and a long oval table draped in deep green fabric, resembling a monastic chamber where only bare arguments were allowed. Senator Marco Rubio sat at the head, arms folded, a faint sardonic smile curling his lips. He exuded control, each movement measured, each glance sharp. As Lavrov took his seat, the room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first word that could turn the night into legend. In the heart of New York, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Black vehicles glided out from the airport, blending into the relentless flow of traffic. The city's energy pulsed with the cacophony of revving engines, blaring sirens, and the piercing horn of an old bus. Yet within this chaos, a certain harmony prevailed. The city operated like a colossal organism. Millions of lives navigated their paths. Through tinted windows, Sergei Lavrov absorbed the rapidly changing scenery of gray Queens neighborhoods, industrial zones, gas stations, and neon signs flickering in the fading light. He was quiet, his silence imbued with focus. Sergei Viktorovich had a knack for perceiving the world in vivid pictures, where every street sign became a crucial piece on a grand political chessboard. "It's all predictable," Vasily Nebenzia remarked softly, breaking the silence in the car. Their recent encounters revealed Washington's intent to assert a distance, nothing more, nothing less. Lavrov nodded, a slight smile appearing. Distance could be a tool, let them believe they're keeping us at arm's length. You know, Vasily, sometimes it's beneficial to be met without ceremony. It keeps you honest, and the focus remains on words rather than the fanfare around them. Nebenzia gazed out the window, watching the distant outlines of Manhattan's skyscrapers pierce the skyline, resembling the walls of another world where nations' fates hung in the balance. His mind recalled the old speeches of Soviet diplomats about equality, nations' rights to independence, and the fragility of peace. In contrast, Lavrov's thoughts traced back to a different time. As a young man in the Soviet era, he had witnessed seasoned colleagues discussing negotiations with Americans during the Cold War. Back then, discussions followed a distinct rhythm, long tables adorned with crystal decanters and thick notebooks, the sound of pens scratching against paper filling the air. Those meetings were steeped in tension but also respect. Familiarity was a luxury no one dared to afford, and each gesture weighed heavy with historical significance. Today promised something different. Too many influential figures, too many competing interests. Marco Rubio's name echoed frequently across the news. Sharp and ambitious, he thrived on provocation. Yet Lavrov was no stranger to such adversaries. He had his repertoire of patience, built from the robust foundation of Soviet diplomacy, where every word was measured like an equation. As their convoy approached the intricate streets of Manhattan, an unexpected tension filled the air. Would Lavrov's seasoned reputation hold strong amidst the chaos of shifting alliances? How would the powerful figures feel about what was to come? The stakes were monumental, and the shadows of history loomed large. The vehicles slowed, then halted before a discreet building along the East River. This was not the grand UN venue awaiting Lavrov tomorrow but an unassuming meeting room for intense discussions. As he stepped out, he adjusted his scarf and briefly looked skyward, where heavy clouds hung low, as if the city itself wished to press its guests down upon the ground. But even under that weight, a smirk crossed his face. If only every cloud could disperse with a single, well-chosen word. Yet behind that door waited more than just Senator Rubio and American officials. In a shadowy corner lingered a figure undetected by all, a mystery that could alter the course of their encounter. Would this unseen presence tip the scales of diplomacy in unexpected ways? The weight of their exchange would soon be felt across the globe. In a world brimming with tension and political intrigue, two figures stood at the forefront of an unexpected narrative. Marco Rubio, often in the headlines, was known for his sharp wit and ambitious nature. He relished in provoking reactions, yet Sergei Lavrov was not fazed. Years of practice in diplomatic arts honed Lavrov's patience, each word he uttered crafted with precision, as if he were playing a strategic game of chess. As their convoy crossed the bridge into the maze of Manhattan, remnants of the morning rain created shimmering puddles on the asphalt, reflecting the vibrant lights of traffic signals and storefronts. People hustled past, some pulling their coat collars tightly against the breeze, others rushing to catch trains, and a few idle souls sipping coffee as if oblivious to the world around them. Despite the mundane hustle, their delegation commanded attention. Even through tinted glass, onlookers sensed the gravity of those seated within the vehicles, individuals whose decisions could impact the globe. Curious passers-by halted on the sidewalks, some craned their necks to steal a glimpse inside, capturing the moment with their phones. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation, thick as the air before a storm. You know, Lavrov mused, reclining in his seat, we aren't just participants in the assembly today. We are witnesses to a pivotal chapter in history. The pressing question is, who will steer it? Nebenzia remained silent, fully aware that they approached a conversation where every utterance would echo like a gunshot. Though the official agenda revolved around ending conflict, all present were acutely aware the discussion would delve into something much broader, Russia's place in the new global architecture. The vehicles slowed as they arrived at a building along the East River. It was not the ostentatious hall of the United Nations where Lavrov would speak officially the next day. Instead, this was a discreet venue reserved for private meetings. The street was cordoned off, with neatly dressed individuals standing guard, a palpable tension filling the air, as if words were poised to leap into existence. Emerging from the car, Sergei adjusted his scarf and momentarily gazed skyward. Low-hanging clouds enveloped Manhattan, as if the city itself sought to ground its visitors. Yet, a smirk broke upon Lavrov's lips. He understood that the right word could disperse even the darkest of skies. His footsteps echoed against the stone stairway, a herald of the weighty exchanges that lay ahead. Beyond the door, he was awaited, not just by Senator Rubio and American officials. In the shadows of the room's corner, a figure lurked, someone still unrecognized by the others, destined to shift the balance of their meeting entirely. What secret did this mysterious individual hold, and how would it reshape the very fabric of their negotiations? The strains of history were about to intertwine with the present in a showdown of ideologies. With each moment growing more charged, the stakes escalated. How would this clandestine presence influence the high-stakes game unfolding? The answers awaited just beyond the threshold, shrouded in mystery and anticipation. As history's tides prepared to turn once more, the atmosphere grew tense as Sergei Lavrov prepared to confront the unexpected twist awaiting him in the dimly lit meeting room. This was no grand diplomatic hall with luxuries. It was a stark, low-ceilinged environment, dressed simply in dark wood panels and soft lamps that cast gentle light over a long, green felt-covered table. It felt almost monastic, as if superfluous matters were barred at the door, leaving behind only raw arguments. In that moment, anticipation crackled through the air. Marco Rubio sat at the head of the table, arms crossed and an expression that betrayed calmness, yet the corners of his mouth hinted at a familiar snark. He was determined to command the room, his every movement deliberate, a sharp turn of the head, a long stare into the eyes of his counterpart, and calculated pauses before he spoke. "Minister," Rubio stated as Lavrov took his seat, his tone smooth but edged with authority, "we're here to discuss steps toward ending the conflict." The implication was clear. The American government, echoing President Trump's stance, believed that peace was attainable, but compromise would be necessary. Vasily Nebenzia stiffened slightly at the words. Lavrov, however, maintained his composure as if the senator's words had glided past him without impact. Methodically, he retrieved his glasses and set papers before him, though he had no intention of reading them. It was a customary gesture, a declaration of readiness for whatever conversation lay ahead. "Peace," Lavrov replied evenly, "does not come at the snap of a finger. It is born when both parties grasp the cost of war and the value of mutual respect. Russia has always stood for peace, and we recognize that long-term resolution is only possible through equality on both sides." Rubio leaned forward slightly, eyebrows raised. "Equality," he echoed, a note of skepticism in his voice. "The Soviet Union once spoke of equality too, yet it eventually crumbled. Empires do not endure forever, Mr. Lavrov. History teaches us this. Those who refuse to listen disintegrate. I would not want that same fate for Russia." His words pierced the silence, sharp as steel. The temperature in the room dropped, even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to fade. Lavrov raised his gaze, a long, heavy look settling between them. In that moment, it was evident that this conversation was not merely about policies or conflicts. It was a battle of historical narratives, an exploration of legacies that could reshape their world's dynamics. The tension was palpable, everything was poised on the edge of revelation, waiting for a spark that could ignite a dramatic shift in the unfolding dialogue between these two powerful figures. Just moments ago, an astonishing news broke the silence of the world. Sergei Lavrov and Donald Trump Jr. found themselves at the heart of an incredible story unfolding right in New York City. Who would have predicted that Trump Jr. would stand alongside Lavrov, uttering words that would silence the General Assembly? Stay tuned, as this tale unfolds to reveal truths that will leave you astounded. Engage with us by sharing your thoughts in the comments. Where are you tuning in from? Let's dive into this riveting narrative. Sergei Lavrov, a seasoned diplomat, was known for commanding attention wherever he appeared. On that September day, New York held its breath as his plane touched down at JFK Airport. The sky was exceptionally clear, almost unnaturally light for autumn. Yet, a frigid Atlantic breeze carried hints of the sea, gasoline, and fresh asphalt, enveloping the moment in a strange tension. An official welcoming committee awaited him, a minimalist affair, devoid of fanfare, no orchestras, no red carpets, no fluttering flags. Just a few stern protocol officers and darkened vehicles, signaling a cautious welcome. Lavrov, accompanied by his colleague Vasily Nebenzia, walked with purpose. Nebenzia's watchful gaze seemed to pierce through the masked curiosity and latent envy on the faces of other country delegates waiting nearby. Here stood two men who represented not just their countries, but the echoes of a past when the word from Moscow bore as much weight as that from Washington. Lavrov, despite the fatigue of countless travels, strode confidently. His tailored wool coat fit flawlessly. Complementing his stoic features, his graying hair added a distinguished charm. As they descended the plain steps, smiles disappeared. The air thickened, and everyone seemed to hold their breath. The world was on edge, anticipating the impending encounter. No one dared breach the delicate line between politeness and open hostility. Soon, the convoy of cars merged into the pulse of Manhattan, the chaotic soundscape of the city mingling with sirens and the blaring of horns. Lavrov's eyes, observant yet distant, scanned the gray neighborhoods of Queens and the industrial fringes, every street a piece on an elaborate political chessboard. Everything is predictable, Nebenzia murmured, indicating that Washington aimed to uphold the distance. Lavrov nodded, a sly smile tugging at his lips, for he understood distance as a tool, a facade of control. Sometimes it's better to be met without fanfare. It keeps the focus sharp on what's important. As their vehicles crossed the bridge into the labyrinth of Manhattan, rain from earlier left glistening puddles reflecting the city lights and morphing a typical day into an almost cinematic experience. Amid the rush of pedestrians, the delegation attracted attention. Their presence hinted that monumental decisions rested within those darkened windows. Curiosity sparked along the streets as people paused, trying to catch a glimpse of the individuals inside. The atmosphere buzzed with a palpable anticipation, an electric charge of unease. Suddenly, Lavrov broke the silence. Today, we are not just participants in the General Assembly. Today, we bear witness to a new chapter in history. The real question is, who will dictate its course? Nebenzia remained quiet, knowing they were about to engage in a dialogue where each word would carry weight. The official topic might be conflict resolution, yet everyone in that room understood the stakes were far more significant. Their convoy slowed and halted outside a discreet venue on the East River, not the grand UN headquarters where Lavrov would speak the following day but rather an enclosed space chosen for quieter discussions. As Lavrov stepped out of the car, he adjusted his scarf and briefly gazed towards the gloomy sky. The clouds pressed low, as if New York sought to ground its guests, but Lavrov smiled inwardly. He knew the right words could disperse any looming storm. His footsteps echoed against the stone steps leading inside. Awaiting him were not just Senator Rubio and American officials. In the shadows loomed a figure unknown to all but a select few. This person was poised to alter the dynamics of the meeting entirely. The interior of the room felt starkly different from the polished sheen of diplomatic receptions. A low ceiling and simple dark wood paneling created an almost austere setting. The ambience was subdued with a long oval table dressed in green felt, reminiscent of a monastic space where only bare arguments mattered. The tension was palpable as Marco Rubio settled at the head of the table with his arms crossed, the corners of his mouth hinting at a smirk. "Mr. Minister," he initiated once Lavrov took his seat. "We are here to discuss steps towards ending the conflict." The audacity of his confidence was evident, akin to a beast revealing its fangs. Just as he began his next retort, clarity shattered the air from the corner of the room, an unexpected voice calm yet firm, punctuated with a slight rasp. "Indeed," it declared. Everyone turned in surprise. Just moments ago, the figure was presumed a mere translator or guard. Yet, now it stood revealed, Donald Trump Jr. This change in dynamic was no mere coincidence, it was an omen that hinted at a far more profound discourse than anticipated. All eyes turned to the corner, where a presumed translator suddenly rose. The silhouette resolved into Donald John Trump Jr., tall and upright, his presence unmistakable. What could a son of a former president be doing in a hushed diplomatic enclave? The room seemed to hold its breath. He wore a classic dark blue suit, but his bearing was that of a debater, not a nervous observer. His posture screamed confidence, as if the fabric were merely a mask for a character that shuns formalities. He stepped forward, voice steady, addressing Senator Marco Rubio. "I respect your right to opinion, but if my father were here, he would not let you speak to Minister Lavrov in that tone." A tense pause followed, the air thick with anticipation. "America often forgets who stood beside it in its darkest hours," he continued, eye scanning the assembly. The senator's brow furrowed, yet he said nothing. The clatter of paper ceased, even the secretaries fell silent. Trump Jr. pressed on. The Soviet Union was flawed, but it was the shoulder that kept the United States steady against a common foe. He gestured, recalling distant battlefields. When American troops stormed Normandy, millions of Soviet soldiers already held back the German tide on the Eastern Front. He listed the Red Army's push into Manchuria, aiding Pacific allies. The result? Victory, shared under all banners, not just the Stars and Stripes or the Union Jack, but also the Red Banner. A faint spark flickered in Lavrov's eyes, hidden beneath stoic calm. The room felt charged, like a storm about to break. What would the Russian minister answer when the silence deepened? In the previous moment Trump Jr., clad in a navy suit, reminded the assembly of the Soviet Union's wartime sacrifice, challenging the senator's narrative. Could his unexpected tribute unsettle the carefully scripted agenda of the General Assembly? Lavrov lifted his glasses, the lenses catching the dim light, and placed a stack of papers on the green cloth table. Peace does not arrive by decree, he intoned, each word punctuated by a deliberate pause. It is born when adversaries recognize the true cost of war and the value of mutual respect. He glanced at the hidden figure in the corner, a silhouette that had remained unnoticed until now. The secretive participant, shrouded in a plain coat, seemed almost a specter, yet radiated a steady presence. Lavrov continued, Russia, as the successor of the Soviet legacy, stands ready to remind the world of its contributions. A low murmur rippled through the delegates, the scent of coffee mingling with the metallic chill of the air-conditioning ducts. Suddenly, the room's atmosphere tightened, as if an invisible hand had pulled a cord. Senator, Lavrov said, equality cannot be proclaimed by those who ignore history. The senator's jaw tightened, his ears picking up the faint hum of distant traffic beyond the sealed windows. A single footstep echoed from the shadowed aisle, drawing every gaze. Who was this newcomer, and what purpose did he serve in this high-stakes encounter? The tension hung like static before a lightning strike. A shocking revelation unfolded just 5 minutes ago. A secret pact between a seasoned diplomat and a former president's son could reshape global power. Who would dare silence such a bold declaration on the world's biggest stage? Stay with me, the truth will astonish you. Brief recap of the earlier scene. I had been poring over memoirs of the era, reading how Roosevelt insisted on an alliance with Moscow, declaring, "We cannot do without Russia." I learned of Soviet convoys braving the Arctic Ocean, delivering vital supplies to allies. Those daring voyages were risks, sacrifices, and the foundation of cooperation. He raised his voice just enough to command attention. Today Europe tries to impose its own rules, forgetting who gave it the very ground it walks on. He reminded them that without the Soviet Union, Europe might have vanished entirely. Russia, as the successor, has the right to recall that truth, he declared. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Then Marco Rubio cut in sharply. Are you seriously placing Russia on the same level as America? Before anyone could answer, a younger voice interrupted, Donald Trump Jr., firm and unwavering. I want Russia beside America, he said, as it stood during the days when the world teetered on a knife edge. He urged a return to the lessons of the Second World War, insisting cooperation, not blame, should guide the future. Lavrov's eyes snapped from his documents to the Trump Jr. gaze. In that stare lay an unspoken acknowledgement. You spoke words we usually reserve for ourselves, he whispered. Rubio leaned back, his calm facade cracking for a moment. Irritation flickered in his eyes. He had not anticipated an American voice siding with Moscow. Trump Jr., sensing the shift, pressed further. Together, America and Russia can keep Europe from reckless moves. He dismissed hidden games, calling for a focus on the future built on honest history. A heavy silence settled over the hall, thicker than any spoken argument. The walls seemed to swallow each syllable, ready to echo them later in whispered corridors. Lavrov gave a slight nod, as if sealing a pact, yet everyone sensed this was only the opening act. The great assembly chamber buzzed like a hive. Delegates took their seats, translators checked headphones, bright spotlights bathed the podium. When Lavrov entered, his steps were deliberate, each footfall resonating on the marble floor. He moved without haste, a portrait of composure. Outside, dark clouds pressed low over the city, as if New York itself tried to anchor its visitors. Lavrov adjusted his scarf, glanced upward, and smiled thinly. He knew words could disperse those clouds. He entered a discreet room on the East River, a space far removed from the opulent UN halls. Low ceilings, dark-stained wood panels, and a lone oval table draped in muted green fabric created a monastic atmosphere, nothing but raw arguments allowed beyond the door. The air smelled faintly of steel and old paper. Rubio sat at the head, arms crossed, a practiced smile masking a keen stare. His lips twitched with a habitual sarcasm, ready to dominate the conversation. Lavrov took his place opposite, laying out his papers with a slow, deliberate motion, as if performing an ancient ritual. "Minister," Rubio began, his voice measured, "we are gathered to discuss steps toward ending the current conflict." He glanced toward the United States, hinting that President Trump believed peace was within reach, yet peace required concessions. Lavrov lifted his glasses, eyes never wavering. "Peace does not arrive on orders," he replied, his tone calm yet firm. "It arises when both sides understand the true cost of war and respect each other's sovereignty." He spread his hands, letting the quiet fill the room. Rubio leaned forward, eyebrows knitting. "The Soviet Union once spoke of equality, yet it collapsed." He smiled thinly. "Empires do not endure forever, Minister Lavrov. Those who ignore history crumble." A flash of memory crossed Lavrov's mind, old Soviet diplomats speaking of equal partnership, of nations free from domination. He answered, "History teaches us to listen. Those who refuse crumble, but those who adapt survive." The words hung heavy, each syllable a weight on the polished wood. The conversation paused, the silence louder than any accusation. The faint hum of the city beyond the window seemed to pulse in rhythm with their breathing. What would follow? Could a single exchange shift the course of a generation? Rubio's eyes narrowed. "What if the world expects us to repeat past mistakes?" he asked, his voice a low challenge. Lavrov's reply was a whisper that cut through the stillness. "Then we must write a new chapter. Together." A sudden tap at the door announced the arrival of an unexpected figure, a senior advisor whose presence had been concealed until now. The room's atmosphere sharpened, anticipation crackling like static. The story pauses at this moment, the fate of continents hanging on the next sentence. Who is this hidden player, and what will they demand? The answer awaits in the shadows of the assembly, where words become weapons and alliances are forged in silence. The assembly hall buzzed with anticipation, much like a beehive. Delegates settled into their seats, and interpreters checked their headsets. The lights above the podium shone brightly, akin to a theater spotlight. Yet, silence enveloped the room the moment Sergei Lavrov stepped in. His pace was slow but exuded confidence, as if the very hall attuned to his footsteps. His perfectly tailored suit and a muted burgundy tie symbolized an unspoken legacy, echoes of the Soviet flag that once billowed over Berlin in '45. As he moved behind the podium, the front rows of delegates leaned in, decoding the tension in the air. Some crossed their arms defensively, bracing for the political barbs, while others attentively activated their translation devices, sensing that this address would transcend mere formalities. "Mr. Chairman, esteemed colleagues," Lavrov began, his voice calm yet imbued with a deep inner strength. "We live in a world where the lessons of the past are often forgotten. Too frequently, we hear calls for division, sanctions, and obstacles. Yet, it was our cooperation that instilled hope in humanity." He paused, allowing his words to linger, heavy with significance. The Soviet Union, now succeeded by modern Russia, paid a harrowing price during World War II, millions of lives lost, cities reduced to rubble, and villages burned. But we endured. Not just survived, we extended our hands to our allies, assisting the United States in its battle against Japan during those fateful days when the world's existence hung in the balance. The hall listened intently. Even the habitual page flippers locked their eyes on the speaker. In today's climate, where some in Europe pursue a new confrontation, we must remember that without recollection of our cooperation, we risk repeating the blunders of history. Europe owes its very existence not solely to its own endeavors but also to the Soviet Union's decisive actions in averting catastrophe. A sense of collective anticipation rippled through the audience. Just as they expected him to conclude, Lavrov delivered a shocking turn. Yesterday at a closed meeting, I heard words I feel compelled to share. Donald Trump Jr. reminded us all that the truth of history does not belong to a single side. The air crackled with intensity. How would this unprecedented alliance shift the course of conversations at the United Nations? What answers lay buried beneath the political maneuvering? What if the son of a former U.S. president stepped into a sealed diplomatic hall and uttered a line that could freeze every microphone, silence every interpreter, and force the world to rethink the rules it has lived by for decades? Could a single sentence shift the balance of power that night in New York? Brief recap of the previous episode: the Soviet Union averted a disaster, and a warning echoed, do not repeat the path of oblivion. In a closed meeting yesterday, an unexpected voice rose. Donald Trump Jr. reminded everyone that history does not belong to one side alone. The room buzzed with whispers, glances, and the rustle of papers as delegates tried to decode his message. Now the scene shifted to the grand hall where Sergei Lavrov stood, his presence turning the air heavy, the scent of polished oak mixing with the faint perfume of distant rain. He glanced at the room, feeling the weight of past alliances against fascism. If the United States and Russia remember that they once fought together against Nazism, perhaps today we can find a way to act together, he began, his voice steady, each word landing like a measured drumbeat. A ripple of murmurs rolled across the chamber. Many had never heard that the former president's son was even present, let alone voiced support for Moscow. Lavrov pressed on, his tone sharpening. True equality is not a glossy slogan. It is the willingness to acknowledge each other's achievements and to abandon mutual restrictions. He mentioned sanctions, bans, and barriers as rusted wheels that slow the global engine. Strong nations grow stronger when they do not hinder each other, when they trade, cooperate, and build a shared future, he declared, raising a hand as if a conductor signaling a crescendo. He spoke of opening bridges where others raise walls, of rejecting confrontation in favor of mutual respect and joint development. The audience responded with a measured, lingering applause, steady, not thunderous, a sound that settled into the memory of the room. For diplomats, that quiet approval mattered more than any standing ovation. The steady murmur promised that Lavrov's words would be quoted in backroom discussions, cited in reports, and transmitted in telegrams to distant capitals. Lavrov stepped back from the podium, his face calm, the calm of a man who does what he must. Beside him, Vasily Nebenzia caught a flicker of the familiar fire that ignites in a diplomat when he knows his message has hit its mark. The applause faded, and a businesslike silence reclaimed the space. Delegates exchanged looks, some whispered into ears, others scribbled hurried notes, a few stared into the void, pondering the implications. American representatives sat with stone-cold expressions, yet a subtle tension crept through their posture. The room's atmosphere tingled, as if the very walls were humming with the charge of impending decisions. What would happen when the statements turned into actions? Which nation would seize the moment to reshape the fragile peace? The next breath of the assembly would decide whether words would echo only in halls or reshape the world outside. Just moments ago, a shocking announcement stirred the world. Sergei Lavrov and Donald Trump Jr. found themselves at the heart of an unbelievable encounter in New York City. No one could have predicted that Trump Jr. would stand alongside Lavrov and deliver words powerful enough to silence the entire UN General Assembly. Stay tuned for the full story, and prepare to be amazed. Leave a comment about where you're listening from, and let's dive in. Sergei Lavrov always entered a room as if the very space had to adjust to his presence. On that September day, New York held its breath as his plane touched down at JFK Airport. The sky was remarkably clear, an odd lightness for autumn. Yet, a cold wind from the Atlantic carried scents of the sea, gasoline, and fresh asphalt. After a recent rainfall, a formal welcoming committee awaited, but the greeting was understated: no orchestras, no red carpets, only a few stern protocol officers and dark-windowed cars, dispensing with the usual fanfare. The atmosphere felt calculated. Lavrov, with Vasily Nebenzia beside him, walked down the airplane steps. The two men projected an aura that demanded respect. Curious and wary glances were exchanged among delegates from other nations, noting that even in their restrained reception, this duo represented something greater. Lavrov's confident stride, coupled with his impeccably fitted dark wool coat and well-maintained hair, spoke volumes about his seasoned experience in politics. As their motorcade merged into New York's chaotic flow, a sense of anticipation hung in the air. Conversations buzzed amongst diplomats about Lavrov's forthcoming address, as they sensed the stakes were high. Would the discussion shift the paradigm of international relations? Inside the car, the tension mounted as Lavrov gazed out at the familiar landmarks, each street, every sign feeling like a move played in a grand political chess game. Everything is predictable, Nebenzia noted quietly, his eyes scanning the road ahead. Lavrov smiled faintly, aware that the distance maintained by Washington was merely a strategic tool. They both knew their roles. For Lavrov, such encounters were about words that mattered, not the grandeur typically accompanying diplomatic functions. Meanwhile, a story was unfolding behind closed doors, one that could alter the trajectory of global diplomacy. Amidst the swirling discussions, Trump Jr. would emerge as an unexpected ally to Lavrov. Just as Lavrov prepared for this pivotal meeting with Trump Jr., a man known for provocations, a question loomed ominously: what hidden truths would surface in their closed-door conversation? With tensions brewing and expectations soaring, the moment of truth was nearly at hand. Would history remember this meeting as a turning point or merely another diplomatic rendezvous? A flash of memory lingered from the earlier exchange. Trump Jr. smiled, his voice warm. He spoke of the Soviet Union's role in the Second World War, of a missing gratitude that could reshape ties. He told Lavrov that respect should flow both ways. The young Trump hinted that if America recalled that shared triumph, the present clash might soften. Lavrov listened, his eyes steady, as the conversation slipped beyond the formal record. A sudden, hushed question pierced the corridor: could a whispered promise alter the fate of continents? The air smelled of rain-slicked pavement and distant diesel. Shadows stretched across the marble as the delegation entered a discreet UN suite. Low-ceilinged walls absorbed the city's roar, leaving only the faint hum of fluorescent lights. A heavy oak table, draped in green felt, waited like an altar. The room smelled of old paper and faint ozone. Marco Rubio perched at the head, his fingers steepled. He wore a measured grin, thin as a razor's edge. "Minister Lavrov, we convened to discuss the path to peace," he began, his voice echoing off the paneling. A pause hung, charged. Lavrov placed his glasses down, unfolded a thin dossier, then let it rest untouched, a silent signal that words, not papers, would carry the weight. "Peace does not arrive on command," Lavrov answered, his tone calm as winter ice. "It is born when both sides see the cost of endless war." He inhaled the faint scent of coffee from a nearby break room, letting the aroma settle his thoughts. "Equality once guided the Soviet ideal," he continued. "But empires crumble when they forget humility." His gaze flicked to Rubio, then to the opaque window where Manhattan's towers glittered like distant constellations. The room tightened, every breath a needle. Rubio leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "History repeats for those who ignore its lessons." A subtle tremor ran through Lavrov's jaw, a flicker of a smile, barely there, hinted at a deeper resolve. He whispered, "The world will not wait for polite gestures, it demands action." Outside, sirens wailed, rain splattered against glass, and the city's pulse quickened. The delegation sensed the approaching night, its neon veins throbbing with possibilities. As the meeting drew to a close, a figure lingered in the shadowed doorway, a silent observer whose presence could tilt the balance. Who was this unseen player, and what secret counsel would he offer before the General Assembly's dawn? Could a single whispered sentence in a Manhattan hotel reshape the balance of global power? Earlier we saw rain-slicked streets turning into glass rivers, neon lights flickering on wet pavement, a hidden reality blooming behind each storefront. Here diplomacy found its true voice. In the hush over a glass of red wine, glances crossed the polished table, informal meetings settled questions too sharp for formal protocol. Today's New York felt different. Lavrov's words at the General Assembly and an unexpected address by Donald Trump Jr. stirred a storm. Hotel corridors glowed late into the night. Delegates lingered, unwilling to surrender sleep. In one lobby, South American envoys argued fiercely. "Did you hear what he said?" a Brazilian representative shouted, eyes bright. Russia and the United States together could halt Europe. The claim could flip every narrative. But who would believe it? An Argentine colleague scoffed, "In America he is just a president's son, not a statesman." Yet the son's blunt statement echoed louder than any press release. Across town, a modest French bistro housed silent European diplomats. Each stared at his own thoughts, tension thick in the air. One whispered, "If Washington allies with Moscow, Europe loses its levers." An older envoy nodded, bitterness in his voice. "We forgot the price of freedom in '45. They remind us now, at the worst possible moment." Meanwhile, a skyscraper with panoramic windows hosted a small group of American senators. The atmosphere crackled. Marco Rubio paced, restless. "This is betrayal," he snapped. "Our president's son sides with Lavrov." Imagine the headlines. A colleague tried calm. "Don't fan the flames. The press will decide what to print." Yet he admitted, he said things many will relish. "We have a nostalgic crowd longing for the days when America and Russia were allies." Lavrov remained composed, his stare unshaken. He placed his glasses gently, spread untouched papers across the table, an old diplomatic ritual. "The world does not arrive on orders," he said slowly. "It is born when parties grasp the cost of war and mutual respect." He continued, "Russia seeks lasting peace, but only on equal footing." Rubio leaned forward, voice low. "Equality once promised by the Soviet Union ended in collapse. Empires crumble, Lavrov." He paused, the room holding its breath. "History teaches that those who ignore it fall apart." A sudden chill brushed the room, as if the city itself inhaled. Lavrov's eyes narrowed, a faint smile appearing. "The secular union you reference left ruins, not lessons," he replied. "It survived through experience, not myth." The tension rose, each word a measured strike. In the corner, a figure unseen by most watched, hands folded, waiting. Who was this silent observer, ready to shift the entire game? The answer lingered, poised on the edge of the next secret meeting. A quick glimpse of the tense hallway, a senior official worries about how the press will spin his words, while a colleague tries to calm him, urging patience. "Do you see the headlines forming?" he asks. The room hums with nervous energy, the air thick with anticipation. Many recall a time when the United States and Russia stood side by side, allies in a fragile world. Could those memories ignite a new path forward? The question lingers, unanswered, as the lights flicker overhead, hinting at a storm yet to break. The conversation shifts abruptly when Senator Marco Rubio turns sharply, his voice slicing through the murmurs. "Allies with those who bear half the burdens of the 20th century wars," he declares, while another senator adds, "Without them, we would not have won." The words hang heavy, suspending the room in a tense silence that even Rubio cannot breach. Meanwhile, high above the city, Donald Trump Jr. sits in a Fifth Avenue suite, the night skyline spilling into his window. He cradles an aging volume, a collection of wartime recollections from Allied generals, its worn pages exhaling the scent of old paper and distant battlefields. A knock echoes, a close aide of Lavrov steps in, delivering a terse note of gratitude for a surprising stance. Trump's smile is thin, his eyes devoid of triumph. "I spoke the truth," he whispers, "and if we trade truth for politics, we lose the future. I refuse to let America and Russia forfeit theirs." The night deepens, swallowing Manhattan's neon pulse, yet the diplomatic corridors remain awake. Murmurs from the day mutate into rumors. weaving a tapestry of speculation that will reshape tomorrow's cityscape. In Lavrov's Manhattan hotel, the space feels sterile, high ceilings, a panoramic window glowing with the city's restless glow, chairs placed with clinical precision. He sheds his jacket, draping it over a chair, and settles at a desk where a slender folder rests untouched. Outside, taxis blare, streetlights flash, and the metropolis thrums without pause, a paradox of motion without purpose. From an inner pocket, Lavrov draws an old leather-bound notebook, its edges frayed, pages yellowed by time. He flips to a blank leaf, the faint rustle echoing like a quiet promise. What secret will he inscribe before the dawn, and who will hear it first? Crowds still rushed about, even as midnight had long passed. New York never truly slept, a paradox unto itself. The city thrived on movement, yet rarely possessed purpose. Sergei Lavrov withdrew an old notebook from the inner pocket of his coat. The leather cover was worn, its pages yellowed and frayed. In this notebook, he jotted down thoughts and quotes during his youth, phrases from elder colleagues, capturing the wisdom of the legendary figures of Soviet diplomacy. He slowly flipped through the pages, spotting names, dates, and brief notes that echoed with history. Dobrynin, Washington, a steadfast demeanor coupled with a smile. Gromyko, the art of the pause. Kuznetsov, never argue when emotions run high. Each name was a portal to a story, each entry pulling him back to the early days of his career, absorbing the essence of diplomacy like a student in a craft workshop. As memories flooded back, he recalled his father's stories of war, how people in Moscow endured air raids, learned to survive amidst ruins, and still clung to the belief that victory would come. That is real diplomacy, son, his father once said. It isn't just about words or paper, it's the ability to endure and maintain one's composure. Those words had always accompanied Lavrov, a mantra that resonated deeply now in the stillness of his hotel room after a chaotic day. He poured himself a glass of water, contemplating the recent speech by Donald Trump Jr., his own forthcoming remarks, and how they would be received behind closed doors. All of this was merely a prelude, with even greater challenges ahead. The world had transformed, the Cold War was a relic of the past, yet its shadows lingered over the present. Europe sought its path, America its influence, while Russia yearned for recognition. Lavrov felt history repositioning him on the same chessboard once traversed by his mentors. But now, the pieces moved more swiftly, and the rules shifted right before his eyes. The need wasn't just to remember the lessons of the past but to embody that legacy, acting as a bridge between bygone eras and the present. He leaned back in his chair, indulging in a moment of rare vulnerability. Closing his eyes for a few seconds, he saw not New York, but Moscow of the 1970s, a city bursting with dreams and resilience. But what would happen next? As shadows of past glories and current dilemmas entwined, a single question echoed: would he be able to navigate the labyrinth of modern geopolitics and ensure Russia found its rightful place? The tension was palpable, hanging in the air like the electric charge before a storm, promising that the next twist in this unfolding narrative would be anything but predictable. The tension in the room escalated as Marco Rubio leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Truth doesn't matter if it's wielded against us," he stated, a hint of irritation creeping into his tone. "History is a weapon, and Russia has used it skillfully today. If we don't respond decisively, we risk losing everything." His words hung in the air, and European delegates exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement while others remained silent, cautious about entering a fraught debate at such a critical moment. Doubts lingered in the atmosphere, palpable yet unspoken. Meanwhile, across the city at a modest cafe on Broadway, a small group of diplomats from developing nations was engaged in their own discussion. They were contemplating the same issues, but from a fresh perspective. "For the first time in ages, we're articulating what we think," said an Indian diplomat, emphasizing equality and mutual respect. "The West often forgets it doesn't hold a monopoly on the truth." A colleague from Africa chimed in, affirming Lavrov's steadfastness in this regard. The unexpected alliance between Lavrov and Donald Trump Jr. sent ripples through the political landscape. Both sides felt the weight of history pressing upon them once again. Underneath the surface of cordial exchanges, Lavrov maintained an unshakable calm, discussing trade, climate, and security with a smile while effortlessly navigating the invisible tension that enveloped each conversation. Every delegate who sat with him felt the gravity of his recent statements, which had shifted the entire mood in the assembly hall. Rubio, on the other hand, was frantic. He arranged new meetings, rallied support, and endeavored to assert his position. Yet with every speech, he felt increasingly defensive, losing his previously steady composure. Later that evening, as fate would have it, Rubio crossed paths with Lavrov in the corridors of the United Nations. Their eyes met briefly, and Lavrov offered a slight nod of acknowledgement, saying nothing. In that silent exchange, Rubio sensed an underlying challenge, louder than any words could convey, echoing in his mind long after they parted. The assembly hall buzzed with anticipation. Today's agenda seemed straightforward: economic matters, climate initiatives, and humanitarian efforts. Yet everyone understood that this was more than just routine, it was a pivotal moment poised to reverberate across the globe. Would yesterday's uncertainties morph into today's actions? The atmosphere was electric, ripe with unspoken stakes. In an auditorium buzzing with tension, Marco Rubio concluded his speech with a sharp declaration. He insisted that America would never allow Russia to dictate terms or revise history. His passionate words were met with weak applause, as many delegates clapped out of mere politeness. As the murmurs faded, Lavrov exchanged a subtle smile with Nebenzia from across the room, a recognition that Rubio's attack had missed its mark. In the aftermath, discussions began to swirl in the corridors, not just about Lavrov or Donald Trump Jr.'s impact but more significantly about Rubio's faltering grasp. He sounded anxious, some observed, while others noted he was merely attempting to justify his position. The balance of power in the room began to shift, revealing cracks in the rigid facade of U.S. diplomacy. That evening, a new narrative took shape in the heart of New York, one of America grappling with itself. As the meeting drew to a close, the atmosphere became electric. Rubio felt the mounting pressure upon him. He realized he needed to reclaim his authority, otherwise, he would be remembered as a politician who lost face on a global stage. When the chair prepared to end the session, Rubio boldly rose from his seat. "Colleagues," he declared, his voice ringing with defiance, "I cannot leave without addressing this directly. Russia is leveraging the General Assembly to justify its actions. And Donald Trump Jr.'s support for Lavrov is not diplomacy, it's a mere political game. America does not share this viewpoint. We will not stand as allies with those who threaten freedom." The room fell silent. An ominous hush settling over the audience. This was no longer a routine address, it was a personal assault, and all eyes turned to Lavrov. He remained stoic, his head slightly inclined as if absorbing a familiar symphony. Suddenly, a resonant voice echoed from the other side of the chamber: "America is not a monolith, Senator. And when you speak for everyone, you deceive." The atmosphere crackled with tension, sparking an unprecedented confrontation that threatened to redefine the dialogue that night. Could this unexpected twist signal the emergence of a new alliance as tensions flared? Or was it merely the beginning of a deeper divide? The audience held its breath, the stakes higher than ever. Previously, the debate left the agenda and turned into a personal attack. All eyes fixed on Lavrov. He sat motionless, head slightly bowed, as if listening to a familiar tune. Then a voice from the opposite side cut through the room: "America is not a monolith," the senator warned, "and if you claim to speak for everyone, you lie." Everyone turned. What if a young man without any official rank could silence a veteran diplomat in one breath? The air in the dim hall thickened, the hum of air conditioners mixing with the distant sirens of the city outside. Donald Trump Jr. rose from his seat. Calm on the surface, a fierce fire burned behind his eyes, a fire that could make any microphone tremble. "You speak of freedom," he began, voice steady, each word striking like a hammer. "Then let us start with freedom of speech. I have the right to say what I believe is true." He paused, letting the weight of his claim settle like dust on a forgotten table. The truth, he argued, is that without the Soviet Union the world would never have defeated Nazism. And without cooperation with Russia, America has no future. Senator Rubio's face strained, his rebuttal stammered, "These are personal fantasies?" Trump cut him off sharply, "No, these are facts. Facts stored in archives, in Berlin photographs, in the minutes of Allied conferences." He quoted his father, "Look at the result. The result," he said, "is that Russia stands as the legal heir to the nation that saved half the world. To deny that is to betray the memory of our ancestors." The room ignited. Delegates exchanged glances, some barely nodding, others daring a smile. The heat shifted away from Rubio, toward Lavrov. Lavrov rose, his voice soft but clear. "I thank Mr. Trump for his words. They echo not as a political decree but as human memory. Memory makes us strong." He continued, "Russia seeks partners, not enemies. If there are Americans ready to remember the truth, we have a chance to build a future without walls." His words rang like a church bell, silencing the hall with a focused stillness. Rubio stood alone, fists clenched, unable to seize the moment. Trump Jr., a private citizen, had become the voice that would be remembered. As the session ended, delegates lingered, whispering in corridors, the power balance unmistakably altered. A new chapter in world diplomacy was born in New York that day, and the question remains, what will the next move be? The night in New York gleamed vibrantly with an array of lights. For those who had spent the day within the walls of the United Nations, the city appeared transformed. The streets shimmered like rivers of light as taxis glided by, and although people rushed to close their shops, there lingered an undeniable sense that something momentous had occurred, something surpassing the confines of a typical diplomatic meeting. In his hotel room, Lavrov sat quietly by the window, his gaze sweeping over the city's skyline. The desk before him was cluttered with unopened folders, and the phone lay silent. It was a rare moment of tranquility. He contemplated the events of the day, where history had once again thrust him into discussions surrounding themes that should have remained perennial within diplomatic discussions, ideas of truth, alliance, and memory. He thought of the faces of his former colleagues, now long gone. Their voices echoed in his mind, a reminder of how they could convey meaning beyond mere words, their thoughtful pauses brimming with significance. In that moment, Lavrov realized he wasn't merely advocating for his country's interests, he was upholding a legacy of continuity, a thread that endured despite the transitions of epochs. Across the city, Donald Trump Jr. sat alone in the nearly empty hotel bar. Before him rested a glass of whiskey, untouched. He replayed the day's words in his mind, thoughts of truth, alliance, and memory swirling around him. Anticipating the storm of criticism tomorrow, he knew the media would accuse him of harboring sympathies towards Moscow. Yet, an unusual calm washed over him. He recalled his father's lessons on the importance of being true to oneself in politics. People may disagree, his father, Donald Trump Sr., would say. But if you speak your truth, you'll resonate through history. Those words had unveiled new layers of meaning for him today. The night deepened, accompanied by distant sirens and laughter ringing from the streets below. Above the towering skyscrapers, stars sparkled faintly. While New York continued its bustling life, the echoes of the day's events firmly etched themselves into the minds of delegates, a day that would become part of historical accounts. Lavrov poured himself a glass of water, lifting it in a silent toast to the memory of that momentous day, a moment acknowledging both the past and future. There was a surprise in the air, an undeniable shift in the balance of diplomacy. As the session closed, delegates lingered, exchanging whispered debates and sharp remarks in the corridors. The significance of it all was palpable. A new chapter in global diplomacy had been born that very day in New York. Intrigued and perhaps troubled, Trump Jr. pondered his reflection in the bar's polished counter. History doesn't belong to politicians, he thought. It belongs to memory. And if I reminded people of that today, then I did right. What awaited them next? Only time would reveal the unfolding implications of this historic convergence. In the previous part, the bustling life of New York continued amidst the shadows of a significant diplomatic event. Sergei Lavrov quietly poured himself a glass of water and raised it in silence, acknowledging the unseen foundations of diplomacy from the past. Now, let's delve deeper into the unexpected connections and shifting tides of history. As Lavrov held his glass, he reflected on the legacy of those who forged the path of diplomacy. Beside him, Donald Trump Jr. stood at the bar, gazing into his own reflection. A revelation struck him: history doesn't belong to politicians. It belongs to our collective memory. If I've reminded others of this today, then I've done something right. The day had woven past and present into a complex tapestry, one where the echoes of the Soviet Union resonated within the walls of the United Nations, not as a haunting shadow, but as a vibrant memory. It was a day when two individuals from opposing worlds, a Russian diplomat and an American businessman, found common ground in the truth that shapes history. Time has a way of altering faces and epochs, yet it doesn't shift fundamental truths. Respect, memory, and truth remain the cornerstones of peace. As long as there are voices willing to speak these words aloud, humanity will continue to have hope. The night settled over the city, with whispers of sirens and distant laughter blending into the background soundscape. The stars flickered above the towering skyscrapers, creating a serene contrast to the bustling streets below. In every corner of New York, souls intertwined, sharing dreams and legacies. While Lavrov savored the calm in his hotel room, his thoughts drifted to those who had come before him. He recalled the stories of senior diplomats, whose voices resonated with wisdom, and who understood the weight of unspoken words. Today, he felt a responsibility to carry their torch, advocating not just for his country's interests but defending an idea, that of continuity and the deep connection that transcends epochs. On the other end of the city, Trump Jr. contemplated the day's revelations. He knew a storm of criticism awaited him, with headlines potentially labeling him a sympathizer. But an unfamiliar peace washed over him. Echoes of his father's teachings filled his mind, reminding him that integrity with oneself is paramount in politics. People may disagree, Donald Trump Sr. used to say, but staying true to your beliefs immortalizes you in history. These words, once mere guidance, now took on fresh significance for his son. As the night grew darker, sounds of New York persisted: car horns, the rustle of people moving about, and laughter ringing out in the streets. Yet, beneath the surface, something monumental had shifted within the walls of diplomacy that day. Lavrov and Trump Jr. had inadvertently become allies in a greater narrative. A bond forged not just through political necessity but through a shared understanding of a timeless truth: the past, present, and future are intertwined in the human experience. Raising his glass once more, Lavrov silently honored those who laid the groundwork of diplomacy while acknowledging an unexpected rapport with a man from another world. Meanwhile, in the quiet solitude of the bar, Trump Jr. stared at his reflection, concluding his silent toast to the lessons of memory illuminated that fateful day. The intertwining of their paths had altered the landscape of international relations forever. From the remnants of history emerged the promise of a renewed peace, one built on the principles of respect and understanding. In that moment, both men grasped a profound truth: with every story told and memory honored, they shape the future for the generations to come. A sudden revelation shakes the world. What if the son of a former U.S. president walks side by a Russian foreign minister, and together they utter words that could silence the entire United Nations General Assembly? The question alone crackles like static in a midnight broadcast, hinting at a plot no one imagined. Earlier, the bustling airfield inhaled the arrival of Sergei Lavrov. A September sky stretched crystal clear over Kennedy, a cold Atlantic wind carrying sea salt, gasoline, fresh asphalt. No pomp, no carpets, only a few dark-windowed cars and a stern welcome. The crowd's eyes flickered: curiosity, caution, thin-veiled envy. Lavrov stepped out, his thick wool coat billowing, silver-streaked hair framing a face hardened by decades of Cold War chess. Beside him, Vasily Nebenzia moved like a shadow, eyes scanning, reading silent thoughts. The city's hum grew heavier, as if sensing an unseen storm. Their presence pulled the air tighter, demanding respect beyond ordinary protocol. Now, the memory of that arrival fades into the cramped hallway of a sealed Manhattan conference room. The previous scene's tension hangs, pulling the reader toward the next encounter. Inside, low-lit panels of dark wood line the walls, a green felt oval table dominates, soft lamps casting muted halos. Senator Marco Rubio presides, arms crossed, a practiced smile masking razor-sharp calculation. Across from him, Lavrov settles, pulls glasses from his coat, spreads untouched papers, gestures echoing an ancient diplomatic ritual. "We gather to discuss steps toward peace," Rubio intones, voice steady yet edged with suspicion. Lavrov replies, "Peace is born when both sides recognize the true cost of war." A silence settles, thick as winter frost, each breath measured, each heartbeat a ticking clock. In the background, a figure cloaked in anonymity watches, unseen by cameras, unheard by the press. The previous exchange fuels a rising unease, hinting that the conversation will pivot beyond the obvious. Suddenly, Lavrov leans forward, eyes narrowed, and whispers, "History is a weapon, Russia knows how to wield it." The room shivers, the green felt seeming to pulse. Rubio's mask cracks, a flash of anger spreads across his face, and he demands, "What do you propose?" Before an answer can form, a sharp knock echoes, an unexpected visitor steps into the doorway. The newcomer's identity is revealed to be none other than Donald Trump Jr., his presence turning the diplomatic dance into a high-stakes theater. The audience feels the room tilt, wondering whether this alliance will reshape global power or collapse under its own weight. Just 5 minutes ago, the world was hit with a stunning announcement. Sergei Lavrov and Donald Trump's son found themselves at the center of an extraordinary story unfolding in New York City. No one could have predicted that Trump Jr. would stand alongside Lavrov, delivering words so impactful they silenced everyone at the United Nations General Assembly. Stay tuned, for this tale reveals an astonishing twist that will leave you speechless. On a bright September day, Sergei Viktorovich Lavrov arrived as if the very air adjusted to his presence. New York seemed to hold its breath as his plane landed at JFK Airport. The day was exceptionally clear, not a hint of autumn's chill yet in the air. The sky was as pristine as glass, yet a cold wind from the Atlantic whipped through, carrying the mixed scents of the sea, gasoline, and freshly laid asphalt. A delegation awaited Lavrov on the tarmac, but the atmosphere was decidedly muted, no grand orchestras, no red carpets, and no fluttering flags as seen with other dignitaries. Just a few stern protocol officers and dark-tinted vehicles, all culminating in a terse gesture of welcome. It all seemed proper yet deliberately understated, as if someone in Washington believed that such a presentation could gauge the political weight of their guest. Accompanying Lavrov was Vasily Nebenzia, calm and composed, his scrutinizing gaze drifting among the welcoming committee as if deciphering unspoken thoughts. As they descended the plane steps, delegates from other nations glanced in their direction, their eyes betraying curiosity, a hint of caution, and for some, barely concealed envy. Even in their understated encounter, these two men embodied something more significant than merely their diplomatic ranks. What would unfold next in this charged atmosphere, amid muted expectations and whispers of what was to come? The stage was set for a revelation that may redefine international friendships. What secrets lingered in the air, waiting to be unveiled? What if the most unexpected alliance of the year unfolded not in a covert backroom, but on the bustling streets of New York, where a seasoned diplomat and the son of a former president faced each other like gladiators, and a single sentence from the younger Trump silenced every microphone at the United Nations General Assembly? Could a fleeting remark reshape the balance of power, or is it merely theater for the world's cameras? The answer lies in the shadows of that September afternoon. Earlier that day, the city's skyline seemed to hold its breath as a sleek jet touched down at JFK. The sky was a flawless mirror, yet a sharp Atlantic wind carried the scent of salty sea, gasoline, and fresh asphalt. No grand fanfare greeted the arrival, no orchestras, no red carpet, no waving flags, just a handful of protocol officers, dark-tinted cars, and a curt welcome. Was this modest reception a subtle signal from Washington, measuring the guests' influence in inches? Beside the Russian foreign minister walked Vasily Nebenzia, his gaze heavy, scanning the crowd as if reading invisible thoughts. As they descended the ramp, delegates from other nations exchanged quick glances, curiosity, guarded caution, and a flicker of envy. Even the restrained welcome hinted at forces far beyond mere diplomatic protocol. The story deepens as those two figures entered the city's pulse. Their convoy merged into the endless stream of Manhattan traffic, the air filling with sirens, the roar of buses, and the metallic clang of distant construction. Through tinted windows, Lavrov watched Queen's gray blocks, neon signs, and industrial yards rush by like a moving chessboard. Nebenzia murmured, "Everything is predictable," while the driver nodded, noting Washington's deliberate distance. Yet Lavrov smiled thinly, replying, "Distance is a tool, let them think we are far." The car turned onto the isthmus, the sky darkening as clouds gathered low, as if the city itself tried to press its guests to the ground. Could these looming clouds be a prelude to an unforeseen storm within the assembly halls? The vehicle halted before a modest, dimly lit conference room, far from the grand UN chamber, where a hidden player waited in the corner, poised to turn the entire meeting on its head. What if the most senior Russian diplomat found an unlikely ally in the son of a former U.S. president, and together they whispered a sentence that could silence an entire UN assembly? Picture a clear September morning in New York, a jet touching down at Kennedy, a secret rendezvous hidden from cameras, and a twist that would send shockwaves through every diplomatic corridor. 5 minutes ago the world heard that Sergei Lavrov and Donald Trump Jr. suddenly shared the spotlight in Manhattan. Lavrov stepped off the plane as the wind from the Atlantic carried the scent of gasoline and fresh asphalt. The runway was empty, the welcome restrained, no brass bands, no grand flags, only a few protocol officers and dark glass cars. The atmosphere felt deliberately modest, as if Washington wanted to measure the guests' weight with a quiet gesture. Beside Lavrov walked a stoic figure, his eyes scanning the crowd, reading unspoken thoughts. Their arrival turned heads, stirring curiosity, mild suspicion, and a hint of envy among the onlookers. The convoy slipped onto the highway, disappearing into Manhattan's relentless flow. Clouds gathered low over the skyline, casting broken shafts of light on the towers. Inside the car, the air smelled of leather and faint cigarette smoke from the street below. Lavrov, coat buttoned tight, felt a flash of a bygone era, his gray-tinged hair caught the wind, giving him the silhouette of a parade general. His companion, Vasily, remained ice-cold, his presence a solid anchor. The streets passed like a moving mural of Queen's gray blocks, industrial zones, neon signs flickering. "Everything repeats," Vasily whispered, noting the diplomatic choreography. "Only the faces change." A brief pause in the ride gave Lavrov a rare moment of vulnerability. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and for a heartbeat saw not New York but Moscow in the 70s, snow-covered avenues, a cramped office filled with the smell of paper and ink, long meetings where young diplomats listened with wide eyes to seasoned masters. It isn't enough to remember the past, he thought, we must become the link between that era and today. The vehicle halted outside a nondescript government building on the East River. No grand UN hall awaited, instead, a low-ceilinged room with dark wooden panels and a long oval table covered in green cloth greeted them. The setting felt almost monastic, stripped of excess, demanding only bare arguments. At the head of the table sat Senator Marco Rubio, his hands clasped, a faint sarcastic curve at the corners of his mouth. He rose, his voice steady, and declared, "We are here to discuss steps toward ending the conflict." Lavrov placed his glasses on the table, spread a few papers he never intended to read, and said, "Peace does not arrive on command. It is born when parties recognize the true cost of war and respect each other's equality." Rubio answered with a cold, steel-like warning, "Equality once promised by the Soviet Union collapsed. Empires crumble, Sergei. History teaches us that those who ignore the lesson fall apart." The room fell silent, even the air conditioner seemed to hold its breath. In the far corner, a shadow shifted, a figure no one had expected. This unseen participant, hidden until now, held the power to flip the entire dialogue on its head. As Lavrov's eyes met the newcomers, a new chapter of the story began, promising an outcome none of the diplomats could foresee. What will happen when the hidden hand finally moves? The answer lingered, poised to reshape the world.